Did Neanderthals know they were going extinct? The short answer is no, almost certainly not. That answer feels too simple. It feels unsatisfying. The real question is deeper. It's not about scientific concepts or vocabulary. It's about experience. What did they see? What did it feel like to be a Neanderthal during the last few thousand years of their existence? Did they sense an ending? Did they feel their world shrinking? To get at that, we have to forget our modern minds for a moment. We live in a world defined by global information. We know about population statistics, species counts, and planetary changes. We have the concept of extinction. We can read about the dodo or the passenger pigeon and understand what it means for a species to be gone forever. That entire framework of thinking is a very recent invention. A Neanderthal's world was immediate. It was the valley they lived in. It was the herd of bison they tracked. It was the neighboring groups they might meet once in a generation. Their timeline was the memory of their grandparents and the stories passed down. The idea of a global population of Neanderthals disappearing from the entire planet was not a concept they could have possibly imagined. It would be like a single person trying to imagine the concept of subatomic physics. The building blocks for that thought just weren't there, so let's reframe the question. Instead of asking if they knew about extinction, let's ask what they experienced. Let's look at their world from their perspective. Extinction is not an event. It is a process. For Neanderthals, it was a long, slow, grinding process that unfolded over thousands of years. And it was not a single dramatic moment like an asteroid strike. It was a creeping generational change. A person born in one generation would experience a slightly different world than their parents. And their children would experience a world slightly different again. Nobody would have the big picture. Imagine being a Neanderthal 50,000 years ago. Life is hard, but it's normal. You live in a small family group of maybe 15 people. You are a skilled hunter. You know how to track mammoths, how to read the seasons, how to make incredibly effective stone tools. Your people have been living this way in Ice Age Europe for over 200,000 years. You are the apex predator. You are masters of your world. Your world is cold, but you are built for it. You have a stocky, powerful body designed to conserve heat. You have a large nose to warm the frigid air you breathe. You have the knowledge passed down through countless generations on how to survive in this harsh landscape. You know where to find shelter in the caves and rock overhangs. You know how to make fire and keep it going. You take care of your own. Evidence from their skeletons shows that Neanderthals cared for the sick and injured. Individuals who would have died alone survived for years with debilitating injuries, meaning someone was feeding them, protecting them. This was a tough life, but it was a life of community and deep competence. Their total population was always small. Estimates suggest there might have never been more than 70,000 Neanderthals alive at any one time across their vast range, from Britain to Siberia. Most of the time, the number was probably much lower, maybe 10,000 or 20,000 individuals. That means groups were spread thin. You might go your entire life without meeting another group of Neanderthals. Your world was your family, your valley, and the animals you shared it with. Loneliness, from our perspective, was the default state. Seeing another group would have been a major event. Now, fast forward a few thousand years, the world starts to change. The climate of the Ice Age was not a stable, deep freeze. It was incredibly volatile. It could swing from cold and dry to relatively warm and wet in the span of a few decades. For a Neanderthal on the ground, this meant the world was unpredictable. One generation might live in a forested valley full of deer. But then the climate shifts rapidly. The forest dies off and is replaced by open, cold steppe. The deer are gone. Now you have to hunt mammoths or horses, which requires different strategies, different tools, a different way of life. This climate chaos was a constant pressure. It forced them to be adaptable, to move, to change their hunting patterns. But it also meant life was precarious. A few bad years, a sudden cold snap that kills off the local game, and your small group could be in serious trouble. A group of 15 could easily become a group of 10, and once a group gets that small, it's hard to recover. You have fewer hunters, it's harder to defend a kill from scavengers, and most importantly, your gene pool shrinks. This was the backdrop. A tough, unstable world with a very small, thinly spread population. Now, add another factor into this mix. A new kind of people arrives. They come from the south, out of Africa. They are us. Homo sapiens. What did a Neanderthal think when they first saw one of us? We don't know, of course, but they likely didn't see us as a different species. They probably just saw another group of tall, skinny people. Maybe they were curious. Maybe they were fearful. Maybe they just avoided them. The arrival of modern humans was not an invasion. It wasn't a war. There's very little evidence of widespread violence between the two groups. The idea of a Neanderthal wars is a modern fantasy. The process was much quieter, much more subtle, and in many ways more devastating. These new people were different. They had a different kind of technology. Neanderthals had the Mousterian toolkit, a very effective set of hand axes and scrapers they had perfected over millennia. But modern humans arrived with new ideas. They made long, thin stone blades. They used bone, antler, and ivory to make needles, awls, and projectile points. They had spear throwers or atlatls, which allowed them to hurl a spear with much greater force and from a safer distance. Imagine a Neanderthal hunting a bison. He has to get close to use a heavy, thrusting spear. It's incredibly dangerous. A modern human could stand further back and throw a lighter, faster dart. They might have a slightly better success rate, and they might have a slightly lower rate of injury. Over 1 or 2 hunts, this difference is meaningless, but over 100 generations, it adds up. A tiny competitive advantage, just a few percentage points better at getting food or avoiding injury, can be the difference between a population that grows and one that shrinks. These new humans also seem to have different social structures. They lived in larger groups. They maintained connections over longer distances. We find seashells from the Mediterranean hundreds of miles inland in their campsites. This suggests they had trade networks, or at least wide-ranging social ties. The Neanderthal group was mostly on its own. If they had a bad year, there was no one to turn to. A human group in trouble might be able to rely on help from their neighbors, their in-laws, in the next valley. This social safety net would have been a huge advantage in the unpredictable climate of the Ice Age. And there was something else. Art. Symbolism. Modern humans, when they arrived in Europe, were creating stunning cave paintings, carving intricate figurines from mammoth ivory, making jewelry from shells and animal teeth. This symbolic world seems to have been much richer, much more complex than what we see with Neanderthals. Neanderthals did have some symbolic behaviors. They used pigments, they collected eagle talons, and strange fossils. They buried their dead, but not on the same scale as the humans who followed them. What does this have to do with extinction? A shared symbolic culture stories, myths, rituals can be a powerful glue. It can hold larger groups of people together. It allows you to have a shared identity with someone you've never met. We are the people of the horse spirit, or whatever their belief was. This ability to create a wider imagined community might have allowed Homo sapiens to maintain those larger, more resilient social networks. So, from a Neanderthal's perspective, what did this all look like? Let's imagine it generation by generation. For your great-great-great-grandfather, life was normal. He may have heard stories of strange, lanky people living far to the south, but he never saw one. For your grandfather, things were changing. His group had to move their hunting grounds twice because the climate shifted and the animals moved. And one time, he saw a camp of the strange people in a neighboring valley. They stayed for a season and then moved on. They seemed to have a lot of children. For your father, the new people were a more common sight. The best hunting spots, the ones with the best rock shelters, often seemed to be occupied by them. And game seemed a little scarcer than in the old stories. His group was smaller than his father's had been. Some of his siblings had died in a bad winter when he was young. They hadn't seen another group of their own kind in many years. For you, your group is just your immediate family. There are only 8 of you. You see the camps of the other people, the sapiens, all the time now. They are numerous. Their camps are noisy with children. Sometimes you trade with them. They have beautiful new kinds of tools. But mostly you keep your distance. The world feels crowded. The old hunting trails your father showed you are now used by them. It feels like there's less room. What you are experiencing is not an apocalypse. It's a slow, creeping marginalization. You are being pushed to the edges, to the less productive lands. The fertile valleys are now full of these other people. You are forced into the colder, higher mountains or the fringes of the tundra. Life gets harder. Food is scarcer. Winters are tougher. Fewer of your children survive to adulthood. And there's another layer to this. We know from genetic evidence that Neanderthals and modern humans interbred. We, a modern non-African human, carry around 1 to 2% Neanderthal DNA in our genomes. This tells us that at some point, these two groups didn't just see each other as competitors. They saw each other as people, they had children together. What did this look like on the ground? It probably happened in many different ways. Maybe a small, struggling Neanderthal group merged with a larger human one for survival. Maybe an individual Neanderthal was accepted into a human group. For the people involved, this was not a story of extinction. It was a story of family, of survival. Imagine a young Neanderthal woman whose family group is dying out. She might join a human group. She would have children who were half human. Those children would grow up in a human culture, learning their language, their tool making, their stories. They would carry her Neanderthal genes, but they would be part of the new world. To her, her line was not ending, it was continuing, just in a different form. This process, repeated over and over across Europe, would also contribute to the disappearance of Neanderthals as a distinct population. They were not just replaced, in some cases, they were absorbed. Their DNA became part of our story. So, as the millennia ticked by, the Neanderthal world was shrinking in two ways. Their geographic range was shrinking as they were pushed into refuge areas like the Iberian Peninsula or the mountains of Croatia. And their population was shrinking through lower birth rates, higher death rates, and assimilation into the burgeoning human population. Did they feel a sense of dread? Did they have a story for what was happening? They must have felt loss. They would have seen that their groups were getting smaller. They would remember their grandparents talking about a time when there were more people, more game. A Neanderthal elder near the end might look at his small family, the last of their kind in that region, and feel a deep sadness. He might tell stories of the old days of great hunts, of a world that was now gone. This is not knowledge of extinction, but it is a palpable sense of an ending. It's the feeling that your world, your way of life, is fading. They might have tried to understand it through their own worldview. Maybe they thought the spirits of the animals were angry. Maybe they believed they had broken some ancient taboo. Or maybe they simply saw it as a time of great hardship, another climatic swing, but one from which they just couldn't recover. The final end probably came not with a bang, but a whimper. The last Neanderthal groups would have been tiny, isolated pockets of people. A single bad winter, a disease, or a failed hunt could have been enough to wipe them out. The last full-blooded Neanderthal on Earth likely didn't know they were the last. They were probably an old person living in a mixed group of humans, or perhaps the last survivor of a tiny, isolated family. Their death was not the death of the species in their mind, it was just their own death. The world moved on. The tragedy of the Neanderthal extinction is a modern one. It is our tragedy because we are the ones who can look back and see the whole picture. We can see the 300,000-year history of a tough, intelligent, and successful type of human coming to a close. We can analyze the climate data, the archaeological evidence, the genetic codes, and piece together the story of their decline. They couldn't do that. They were living in the story, not reading it. They experienced a series of local crises, not a global extinction event. They felt the pressure of competition. They felt the cold. They felt the hunger. They saw their families get smaller. They saw new, more successful kind of people take over their world. They didn't know they were going extinct, but they must have known that their world was ending. And in a way, that's an even more personal and poignant truth. They didn't face a neat scientific concept. They faced a long, slow, and lonely disappearance. They watched their world fade to black, one campfire at a time.